Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Brian Roche and this is
Emily Kaiser.
And today we're going to talk to you about
the 7 lessons learned when implementing DevOps.
So we're pretty excited to be here, Emily, right? What are we going to talk about today? I know that we have user obsession on the slide here. Isn't obsession kind of a bad thing?
Yeah, a lot of times terms in our world are actually quite dichotomous. Obsession, is one term that we actually find opportunity out of.
Yeah,
but a little bit more
cycles.
Exactly. We'll get to that in a bit. But since you picked on me, let me pick on you a little bit, Brian. Scaling DevOps. What the heck?
Crazy, right? Like taking DevOps and doing it at scale. That's the question top of mind for everybody this year as we think about transformation. I mean, that word has been thrown around so much. That's what we're going to cover and talk about today and our lessons learned.
So Brian, first things first, why are we here? Why would Dell EMC World bring us to talk about DevOps?
It's a great question. I mean, everything we do should be for a purpose and with a purpose. And we're all about, business outcomes, especially in the DevOps community. And, when you think about, many, many years ago, we put a man on the moon with technology that would arguably have been embarrassing by today's standards. Look at the phones we have in our pockets, the collective power at our fingertips. And I think about a future. I think about a future where we have, devices all over our body and sensors everywhere. And it's like, what are we doing today? The question I ask is, what are we doing today to set ourselves up for that digital future so that we can not only survive but thrive in that new world, which is what we all want to have, right? What we all want to do. Interesting tidbit, if you look at the S&P index, in the 1960s, the average lifespan was 60 years. The average lifespan today, Emily, is 12.
I got to be honest with you, Brian, that's pretty terrifying.
Pretty terrifying, right? We did a lot, I've done a lot of talks and you've been with me and people will say, this is really negative message. It's kind of terrifying, right? I mean, you're presenting a world that's ever changing and moving at a pace like we've never seen before. Is it all doom and gloom? Well, the good news is it's not, and that's what we're going to talk about today. The world is changing. Many people have not. Many people are continuing to work and adopt the same work patterns they've had for many, many years. Those people, we think, may not be around. They're probably going to be a statistic. But there is a better way, and that better way is to learn by doing. And in the process, you get to do what we did. Transform your team, transform your company, and transform the most important person, yourself. Okay, so 3 years ago, we embarked on a mission. That mission was to open a dojo. What is a dojo? Okay, dojo, adopted from Japanese, is the place where you practice your karate, your kicks, your punches. In our world, it's the place where we practice DevOps. It's a place where we refine our art, where we practice lean startup, and lean strategies for delivering software. But more than that, a secondary goal that we had was to contribute to open source Cloud Foundry, to align with open standards, and to leverage open source software. We think Cloud Foundry is best of breed platform as a service. And then, of course, we wanted to adopt lean work patterns for software delivery. And that's what we've done, and that's what we're talking about today. Now, as we go around the world talking about these new work patterns, many people say, how do I get started? What do I do? What's the first step? I got to tell you, I certainly was one of those people who is, do I worry about culture? What do I change first? Like, what do I do first? And if you look at our path to success, this is what we talked about last year at Dell EMC World. We began with pairing. Unbeknownst to ourselves, that was the place that unlocked the keys to everything else. Because when you think about pairing and extreme programming and everything that Kent Beck talks about, then you start thinking about TDD, test driving your software. Because we want to innovate at equal or better quality, and we want to have lower cost innovation. The quality is one of those things that's just not negotiable. And then, of course, we want to continuously deliver. In a world that is ever changing at a pace like we've never seen before, we need to get our software into the hands of our users to determine that we're on the right track. So building and measuring learning in short cycles, devising an MVP, really figuring out what their needs are is critical. And then the all-important, how do we continuously improve as a team? How do we continuously develop ourselves? Because no two DevOps teams looks the same. Now, what's the one question we get all the time? Are there training programs? Right?
And there aren't, unfortunately. But one thing that I think all of us began with was by reading that practitioner guide that we, use within running lean and our guiding principles, which we consider the lean startup.
Yeah, Eric, you got it. Eric Ries is definitely, the lean startup is the guiding principle, it's the North Star. But running lean really was, for us, the practitioner's guide. How do we actually do this on a daily basis? So I think really critical, great books to read, definitely get you started.
Right. So Brian, okay, so we've talked about kind of, why we're here, but I think one of the terms that's most important to kind of touch base on is what is DevOps? We keep on talking about this term. We go through some of our days saying it 50 plus times, but we never really define it. So what is that to you?
And to be perfectly frank, it means different things to different people, right? And sometimes I get all the way to the end of these presentations and I try to avoid talking about lean or agile or scaled agile framework or DevOps because it has different interpretations. So let's level set in what DevOps is not. Okay, first of all, I used to be, as a software engineer, this is kind of what our delivery lifecycle might have looked like. We would start, writing the code in day one, we'd check the code in, a build engineer would build the code in a nightly build, QA would look to provision an environment, occasionally there'd be a bug with my code and it'd get kicked back to me, but I'd fix it and send it back, and eventually the QA person would get it, and what would they do? They weren't involved when we were devising that product or feature, and so they didn't know what the intention was, and QA is phenomenal at thinking about what is the user outcome, how will they use it, and what value will they derive from the system. And so, having downstream consumers is the exact opposite of what we do. It's the exact opposite of DevOps. But let's simplify it. DevOps, at its core, is a cultural movement. It's a cultural change. And you underpin that and you back that up with automation to support that continuous delivery and rapid innovation. I think about it really simply like that, Emily. That's what DevOps is. It's a cultural change with tools and technology that support that. Now, with a DevOps team, when everybody's sitting co-located and you and I are working together, and you as a product manager, define a feature, and you sit there and say, this is what we want to try to build, I'm involved from the very beginning. And we can talk and we can rationalize what that functionality is, and we can even debate that, and then we can deliver it. And that's so effective, and that's what we do. We have a shared vision, all aligned around a single goal. All right. Now, I get this question all the time. We want to scale DevOps. DevOps is really important to our organization. We got to be able to move quickly. What would the measurement of success be? And I think that's an odd question. We've talked about this, right, over beers. We're a business, right? Revenue's a scorecard. The outcome is customer adoption and revenue. Okay, DevOps and lean strategies evolved from startups, okay, where they're looking at their funding running out in 4 months. They got to move quick.
Right.
But here's some of the things you shouldn't do. I mean, how many times have we seen the assembly, right? Vanity metrics. The number of lines of code we write.
Right. Absurd,
right?
Honestly.
Because the more code you write, the better it is, right? No, wrong. Code's a liability. We talk about this all the time. You want to write as little code as you possibly can to solve that problem. And Conway's Law, we all know what that is. For me, Conway's Law is if your organization is messed up and you get all these downstream consumers, then your deliverable is going to be messed up. That's not what you want. What you want is teams working together, teams of people working together to collaborate, to build functionality. And then, of course, taken from the Toyota production system, eliminate waste. Why do we continue to communicate with each other using iMessage or Communicator or email, right? Put teams together. Stop using Waterfall. What can we measure? Empathy. We can measure, are we working together? Are we up-leveling each other? I often talk about if I could take two options. The first one is, could it take 3 hours to build a piece of functionality with two individuals who are learning and building and forming their experiences? Or could we do it with 30 minutes fast with two people who have experience? Hands down, anytime I will invest in the team. I will invest in up-leveling those people and making those people better. Because when we take that approach like the Marines have, I've got your back, you've got my back, then that leads to the best outcomes.
Right.
When we have empathy and we have a shared context, and we believe in helping and up-leveling each other, that leads to the best outcomes.
Well, I think it also goes beyond, empathy even. Let's think about business value. Code is a liability. We need those two developers at the same screen doing the pair programming. And then on top of that too, when everyone shares context, one person leaves because, let's face it, everyone has to take a vacation at some point or another, and we don't have that single point of failure, which I think is super important.
It's not the end of the world, right? Because we all have a shared context because we rotate often.
Right.
Okay, so the big question is, Why DevOps? Why is DevOps better than Waterfall and better than what we did before?
Yeah, so we always get this question. Folks will come into our office for either a scoping or even a full 6-week engagement, and they'll say to us in the very beginning, okay, this all seems great, your office is fantastic, oh my gosh, your team loves one another, but I don't think this is going to pertain to us. And luckily for us, we do not have to sell anything, and it doesn't take too much of an effort to convince them otherwise. So kind of to start off, I think it's really important to address the fact that DevOps is anything but comfortable.
Yeah, totally.
It forces you to live in uncertainty, which for a lot of people means great risk. Change is hard, impossible for some actually. We actually find that sometimes DevOps isn't for everyone. There are some folks who wouldn't work well in this environment because it necessitates a lot of adaptability.
Yeah.
And that is
you got to work together to solve a problem, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, there's also this cultural shift. It's huge, both all in people, process, and technology.
Sure.
And people have to be aware of that when going in because it takes a lot of discipline to stay on a DevOps track. Finally, when you have a team that is relatively small with, great dreams and feeling like we're being superheroes all of the time, what ends up happening is everyone has to wear a lot of hats. Everyone takes responsibility for every single line of code that's written. And in doing so, from different backgrounds and with different diversity, you're going to find that a lot of people don't speak the same language. And I don't mean that in like common language. I mean that more in vernacular, in those nuances. And so people need to learn to understand one another and to respond accordingly.
Definitely.
In order to stay as cohesive of a team as possible. All of these things are exhausting. The pace is incredible. It's unparalleled actually to any other team that I've ever been on. And you'll find that dissuades a lot of people from the process, but it also adds excitement to our team and it becomes very contagious.
Because we thought we worked hard before until we came
Oh my
into,
gosh, it's unlike anything I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then finally, when you have a lot of different personalities and a lot of different people, and trust me, I understand that no organization can be fully democratic. We all have a mission and a vision to strive for as aligned with the company. But each of us in a DevOps team has equal voice, and that creates conflict all of the time. But for us, conflict actually becomes a positive.
Is it really? Like constant conflict? Because I know that everybody thinks we just party all the time.
Oh
right?
my gosh, and here we go. I mean, thanks for bringing that up.
Here it is, right?
Exactly, right here on this slide. So, there are a lot of preconceived conceptions as to what our team does. Our friends often think of us partying all day. Our company is like, are you guys just sitting in the game room playing video games? External leadership at times, we all know it's true. They all think that we're drinking all day. And because of our excitement when we go home, our families think our jobs and lives are glamorous, which not always the case. We, in the meantime, think we're superheroes,
which, to be fair, we are, right?
At times we are.
But really, we're pair programmed to solve people's needs.
Exactly, and with zero interruptions, and that's really the key here.
Yeah.
So, again, as I had mentioned, more so in that common language, in shared context, in not having that single point of failure, in rapid up-leveling of the team. We're not only looking out for ourselves, but we're looking out for our team and the company. It becomes pertinent that everyone becomes all for one and one for all.
And we power each other, Yeah.
So I want to kind of address this from the very beginning. I don't want it ever to be mistaken that we got here without help. It's absolutely, I think, the core to all of this is having buy-in from every single level. And by that I mean... Really?
Wait a sec. So you mean leadership, the executives, all through all the management layers have all got to be aligned?
They do.
Okay.
And that is a very large challenge, especially when you're kind of starting out. But a DevOps team, the developers on a DevOps team need to want to develop in that way. Middle management needs to understand the value, the business value that we're creating, and executives need to understand the need for digital transformation.
So we're not going to plan out 9-month releases?
We aren't, actually, unfortunately for you.
That was fun. I like that.
So from all of this, we end up getting tons of operational support, data metric support, telemetry support, fiscal support, and from there you can kind of push to start.
Absolutely, Love it.
So where do we start? We have kind of mentioned this topic of pair programming from the very beginning. This is the act of 2 developers writing code at one machine, but 2 monitors. One is designated at actually writing the code, and the other is kind of leading the way, navigating and reviewing the code, and both of them constantly, strategically acting and reacting.
Wait, they're working together? They're not both typing?
Nope.
Wow, so they're going to write less code?
They are going to write less code, and we find that as actually our biggest strength. A lot of people question it, but code is a liability, as Brian had mentioned before.
User obsession. I'm
Here we
talking
go with
about this
that
up
term.
front. Let's go into this. Tell me about it.
Okay.
Right? Tell me about scoping. Tell me about how we get people on the same page, how we figure out what we're trying to build, and importantly, what we don't want to build.
Right. So we are absolutely obsessed with our users, and I mean, really nothing short of that. Actually,
Right.
The user is omnipresent in everything we do, from the very beginning of product inception with the scoping to the very end when we are releasing the final MVP to our customers.
Yeah.
Now, what is a scoping? Scoping is our way of aligning ourselves with the customer.
Right.
What are our needs? What are our business goals, our architectural goals?
Yeah.
You know, what are our anti-goals? Because it's always
Sure.
just as important to understand what you don't want as it is to understand what you want.
Yeah.
You know, current solutions that are out in the market. Who are going to be the users of this product?
Yeah.
It's really important to align yourself from the very beginning with the customer in this sense, not only because you want to be fully, you know, in agreement with the customer, but also because our world is rapidly changing.
Totally.
And needs and wants are also rapidly changing.
Yeah.
And we need to stay fluid and never make a product that's unmalleable.
And risks, like what are the top 3 things we're going to do after we define, you know, where we want to go? What are we going to attack first?
Exactly, exactly. You know, in the technological world that we're in today, possibilities are limitless. But unfortunately, time, money, and human capital aren't. And so
No.
we're here. So, okay, concepts are great, you know, but really, how do we put this in practice? And I'm going to say this. This is the one unnegotiable aspect of
Quality.
DevOps and quality.
Right. TDD's quality, right?
Right?
Yeah.
And this is test-driven development. So test-driven development, very simply, is this. We write a test, we implement the code, and then finally we refactor, always aligning ourselves with that customer. And what we get out of that is super fast feedback and a safety net. A safety net for all of the failures that we inevitably, and actually like making.
Right. When we become obsessed with code coverage, it's not fair to say every line of code is covered, but pretty much, right?
Yeah, it's pretty astounding.
Yeah.
So that brings us here. You know, it was something that we defer to pretty much to answer any question from users.
Yeah.
Is that the customer is omnipresent in everything we do.
Yeah.
Not only in the way that we build a product, but also what we learn from building that product and how we measure success.
Yeah. Love it.
All right, Brian. So we've talked kind of about the topics here, but what's the glue?
The superficial part, right? Remember
Yep.
that talk I gave where I started at a DevOps talk about, feedback and
Right.
empathy and whatnot, and people just didn't get it. I think that if you look, for evidence of transformation in the world, you can see it everywhere. And nowhere is it more true when I look at the Formula One teams. And 25 years ago, it used to take them like 3 minutes to change a tire. Now,
Right.
I today can't imagine changing a tire in 3 minutes. But look at now they do it in like sub-seconds, right? And if you think about their transformation and how they changed who they are and how they work, what are the qualities and the attributes? You can bet that if you're putting the tire on the because you lift one of those heavy tires, right? And put it on the car, and I gotta like screw it in. We gotta talk to each other. We gotta know what our goals are. We gotta know where we're headed. And so Google commissioned research where they talked to over 5 years, they talked to 180 teams. And they had one mission: can we spot trends? Can we understand what it is that makes a great team? And we can quantify that, okay? Because they found no patterns: empathy, feedback,
Right.
psychological safety, lifting each other up. And where do we do that? Where does that happen in our week? Retros, short for retrospectives, right? And it's arguably the most important part of our week. It's where we continuously improve. It's where we talk about what went well, what was not so great, and what was really bad, and what can we improve on.
Right.
And a lot of the reasons why we don't have training programs and things written down is because each DevOps team is going to continuously improve. They're going to continuously adapt their product in the same way that they're responding and adapting to market needs and changes and user needs and changes. So we want a balanced team working at a sustainable pace. We want a team that's lifting each other up and working together with empathy. Failure.
Yeah.
Not like failure's a bad thing, right?
No,
Like, if you
for
mess
us,
up,
we're doing it all of the time, and it's actually probably one of the most important lessons in this talk. What ends up happening is, in order to achieve greatly, truly, you have to be willing to take that risk. But failure for us at such small iterations of delivering code is actually a great thing,
Right.
because it means constant learning,
Yeah.
right? So we turn failure into an opportunity rather than a devastation through something like continuous delivery, where we write the code, run the tests, and then continually integrate and deploy that code with constant customer feedback. Again, bringing that customer omnipresent in everything we do.
I love it.
How do we do that? we build a minimum viable product. Again, code is a liability. So we need to align ourselves with the customer and their problem to see the value of every single deployment that we make. I'm not kidding. Each of us have 10 reasons for any deployment.
Right.
And then finally, we have to pivot or persevere if anything runs off of that course to create a sustainable business.
Yeah. Now, I know we could talk about this for hours, right?
Right.
And we do. We've got a lot of content out there. We have a blog, and we feel really passionate about it. So I think if we were to net it out, Emily, transformation happens from the inside out, right?
It does, and scaling and transformation I'd put kind of hand in hand.
Yeah.
So talk about that really quickly.
So I think transformation does happen from the inside out, and I think maybe we can send folks to look at our presentation, look at our talks, on how you can actually scale DevOps, because we're almost out of time. But I would say the world has changed. Pace to market is like nothing we've ever seen before. But we've proven to ourselves over the past 3 years that DevOps can work like nothing we've ever seen. It enables us to respond to market changes, customer needs, and it enables us to not only survive, but thrive in the new world.
Yeah.
And the technology choices we make today, the work patterns we choose today will set us up for the future. So with that, my name is Brian Roche.
And I'm Emily Kaiser. And those were the 7 lessons learned when implementing DevOps.